A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If the audio is clear and available, kindly confirm. Thank you. We shall be starting in a couple of moments. So, hello, a very warm good morning to all of you, and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to another session of geography, where today we shall be having a discussion for Indian geography. And in today's discussion, as you will see, that all the discussions that we have had prior to this in the aspect of physical geography, whether be it the aspect of climatology, all of that will be put to use today while we are discussing that. So that is why once we have completed the portion of physical geography, and with the help of physical geography, when we have taken a look at the world as well, we have understood the world climate, we have understood the global oceanic circulations in existence, and also the global geomorphic processes and presence that we see. That will be helpful for us in order to understand the portion of Indian geography. Now, this is a portion which is quite relevant for your examination, both for your prelims as well as for your mains exam. So, in this particular area, while UPSC does stick to the basics of it and does ask a lot of questions in prelims and mains, you also have questions which are derived based upon current affairs. For example, let's suppose there has been a new methodology of soil conservation which has been in news. Let's suppose. Now, chances are that UPSC will ask you about that new methodology or that new technology, and what are the various different processes that it ends up conserving. How is it that it turns out to be much more efficient? Suppose, let's say, there is a new methodology of plantation of rice. Now, chances are that UPSC can ask you a detail about it. So, there always the areas which are important in news, which are in news stories, which are mentioned in news, those particular areas are frequently asked by UPSC. Now, in this particular portion of Indian geography, we shall be covering the entire gamut of areas, right from physiography right up till the portion of human geography, human and economic geography, that is population, settlement, and transportation. So here, when we are going to talk about it, first of all, we are going to initiate with Indian physiography. Physiography of India. Then after that, we are going to talk about river systems or drainage patterns. Drainage systems and rivers of India. Then after that, we are going to cover about forests, then soil, agriculture. These portions will come forest and soil, that comes under biogeography. I understand many of us, we don't exactly know about it, that what is biogeography, what is economic geography. But because we have heard about those module names somewhere, we have that tendency or the urge to ask the question that you have covered the portion of physical geography, you have covered the portion of the world, you have covered the portion of Indian geography, but human economic geography is left out, or biogeography is left out. So that is not the case. So forest, soil, etc., they come under the portion of relevant biogeography, and much more proficiency about those areas you gain when you study the portion of environment ecology as well. Then agriculture, mineral and industries, these come under the portion of economic geography. Minerals and industries, and then the human geography, that is population and settlement and transportation as well. So this is what we are going to cover. An important portion of it is something that we have already covered when we have covered the portion of Indian monsoon. Okay, so that is a very relevant part of this portion, which we have covered along with climatology. So from Indian monsoon and Indian climate also, you can always expect questions to be asked very frequently. Okay, so here in the portion of physiographic division, generally you will find that the questions which are asked nowadays, even in mains, you have questions which are asked from this area. And as and when we move along, I will be marking in the slide itself, in the PPT itself, that which is the particular portion from which, or which is the particular topic from which mains questions have been asked. Because previously also, as we have been taking a look at the question paper patterns and the trends for the past few years, direct questions are being asked from portions and the topics that you cover in the PPT itself. Just that you need to have a better conceptualization of it, so that you have the ability to express those concepts if required in 150 words, if required in 250 words, if required even less than that. So that is the ability that we are going to be working upon. Before that, I have certain set of doubts, and okay, so doubt from Pulkit. Sometimes it happens that even though I know more on a topic, but while debating and discussing about the same, I usually get stuck. Please suggest how to improve that. First of all, your purpose should not be to improve it or the content of it to have a good debating point or a debating skill. That is not that should not be the purpose at all. Here, think about it. For any particular topic, whenever you have to think about it, you need a peace of mind. So that is why you need to simulate the examination scenario where you are sitting in front of the table, having a piece of pen and paper in front of you, and think about it from both perspectives, that what can be the positive connotations, what can be the negative connotations. For any particular given issue at hand, there can be both these particular connotations, positive and negative, and you should have the ability to look at both the sides. So when you, let's suppose, take a look at the critical angle, that for example, any move which if you have to think about a criticism for that move. Now, when you criticize something, automatically you get another argument in favor of it also. Or when you provide an argument in favor, from that you can stem out or you can interconnect it with the various subjects, and you can diversify the number of points or the number of perspectives that you can provide for any particular topic. But this also is purely a sum product of practice. Okay. Satish, in climatology, I'm unable to picturize advection fog and radiation fog. So, Satish, radiation fog is basically just like the process what we observed in the case of surface inversion, something very similar. So, in the case of a radiation fog, what happens is that you will observe that during the night time, the surface gets very cold. And how will the surface get cold? Surface will release heat. And how does the Earth's surface release heat? In the form of terrestrial radiation. So that terrestrial radiation means the cooling of the Earth's surface. And when that is carried out quite significantly, then you basically achieve a very cold ground surface, due to which the air above it also cools down quite substantially. As the air cools down, there is condensation, and that is your radiation fog. And then when you have, let's suppose, warm winds moving over a colder area, now, this is a process of advection. But these warm winds, when they will get in contact with the colder surface, there will be condensation which will be initiated, and hence the fog formation. This is your advection fog. Okay. This all topics are covered in 6th to 10th NCRT. Yes, but ideally, I would advise you, as I have been advising from day one, that go for the 11th and 12th NCRT. There is no reason why you should not be able to comprehend 11th and 12th NCRT, and that should be more than sufficient. Okay. Ecology and ecosystem you will never cover in this. Ecology and ecosystem is not in the portion of geography. You will cover it in environment and ecology. And during shifting of ITCZ, which will bring about low pressure over Sargasso Sea. Will it have any effect or change over the sea? No. See, in the case of the Atlantic, the ITCZ never transfers itself to the region of the subtropics. It is only over the Indian Ocean where the ITCZ shifts to over India, because there is a land mass over it which creates that absolute low pressure. But in the case of Atlantic, you don't have much deviation of the ITCZ happening significantly beyond certain latitudes in the northern hemisphere. So that is why ITCZ doesn't reach the area of Sargasso Sea. And this is sufficient syllabus for UPSC? Obviously, yes. As in, I'm unable to understand where the question is coming from. If you are asking the question that if we read this entire syllabus, then UPSC is not going to ask any question outside of this particular portion, then the answer, very honestly, is no. I could basically stand up here and basically praise myself and tell you that all this will come from the PPT itself. But then I would be doing a great disservice to you, because the moment you will appear for the exam hall, you will realize that the nature of exam is such that it will ask you certain questions that you have never come across. So those certain set of questions, you already count it out. When I have told you the, or previously when I had told you the strategy to follow in the prelims examination, how many questions to target, how many questions that you can leave or you should actually leave in order to maintain your mental sanity. Remember, I told you that there are around 20 to 25 questions which are absolutely factual, which even UPSC nowadays doesn't expect you to solve. Out of those 25, even if you are able to get through 5 of them, that is a bumper bonus. The rest of the factual questions, and they come from the area of history also, from the area of geography also. This is the nature of the subject. You will have certain subjects such as polity, etc., from where all the questions are going to come from the same book. But the nature of the subject of geography, of history, of science and tech is such that UPSC will ask you, will try to play around certain facts. And the problem starts when the candidates, they start preparing based upon only those questions and they miss out on the basics. So don't do that. But yes, overall, if you consider this, and I think you have not been attending the sessions previously. So in the previous sessions, we have talked about the fact that out of 105 marks which are asked for the mains, almost around 85 to 90 of them you'll find appearing in the PPT itself. So that is more than enough advantage that you can gain for any particular subject out there. Uh, Pavitra, 11th and 12th, the NCRT books are enough. Is there author to the NCR? Yes, that is more than sufficient. For your general studies, more than sufficient. If you don't trust me, take a look at the previous year questions after you have covered the NCRT. You won't find any particular question there which you won't be able to cover in the mains. I'm talking about, not the prelims. So you won't find any particular question which you could solve by reading a book like Majid Hussain or something like that, but you couldn't solve by NCRT, right? So NCRT provides you with the ability to cover all the various different portions asked in the mains exam. Okay. Abhishek, is there any possibility of amok-like condition also developing over Indian Ocean that would be intensifying cyclonic development? So you have a kind of a circulation there. But see, in the case of amok, there's an overturning happening in very high latitude because the conditions are very, very cold. So that is why there is that overturning happening as the water cools down, loses its temperature, it becomes heavier and denser and then sinks. So that is a circulation that water carries out in. Now in the case of northern Indian Ocean, you don't experience that low temperature so that the water will actually go for an overturn. So that is why you don't find that kind of an overturning circulation. But a part of the global oceanic conveyor belt, a part of it comes through India also, and that part of it is actually the upturning part rather than the downturning part. Okay. Shiva, is IOD phases and ocean current over the Indian Ocean have any relation? Uh, no, there is not much of a relation between that. And the ocean currents in the northern Indian Ocean, they are significantly impacted by the wind movement. And when you talk about the IOD conditions, they are particularly influenced by the heating of the landmass. Insolation, solar insolation is one of the major causes for the creation of these different IOD phenomena. Okay. And Benjita, I am only able to see GS paper one. I don't know if you had any question. And Pulkit, but communication skills will help in interview stage. So that is where you need to be able to communicate what you are able to understand, or whatever is it that you have content inside your mind. You have to be able to communicate that. And one of the good ways of doing that, one of the most simplest ways of doing that, is basically self practice. In case you are getting an opportunity to communicate with other people and develop your skill, fair enough, but that should not only be the prime agenda. In case you really want to improve your speaking skills, presentation skills, the easiest and the simplest skill is, or the practice is, stand in front of the mirror for any particular topic, whatever points are there in your mind. Take a deep look into the mirror. Please ensure that there is an eye contact, and then ensure there is no fumbling and stammering. With that, you will get a kind of a flow, and you will also get a command over your language. And that is very, very important whenever you want to communicate anything. Okay. And Madhuri, in Majid Hussain book's chapter name. Oh, so do you want me to give the chapter name for each of these topics? What is there in Majid Hussain? Is that what the expectation is? Okay. So sorry to tell you, that is something I won't be able to do. And that is something that from the first day I have told you, that is something that I won't be doing, because I have students asking me that in Baiju's book, what is the page number to page number? In NCRT, what is the page number and page number of this? That is something I'm not going to entertain, because I hope you understand that you are preparing for a professional examination, and for that much amount of basic input and hard work you will have to do. And plus, to add on to that, let me also tell you that, for example, whatever we will be covering in physiographic divisions, to the detail at which we will be going through, you will not be able to find that in the basic books for general studies. As simple as that. And the picture of it and the details of it, you will not find in the reference books as well. So that is where, please open up your mind, open up the mind to the possibility of inculcating newer ideas. At the end of the session, take a look at the book. Please don't have that kind of an approach. I know many of you would like to do that, that you keep a screen here and the book there simultaneously. I will cover both of them. I am very well prepared. I have saved time as well. But in that case, neither will you be able to do justice to the book, neither will you be able to do justice to the lecture. So please don't do that. Try to listen to the lecture. I know it is difficult to listen to the lecture for the throughout the day. I understand that you all have a busy schedule, but try to listen to the lecture, try to inculcate it. After that, take a look at the book. Obviously, I hope by the index name, by the content name, you will be able to figure out, okay, this is about forest, but we had talked about physiographic divisions. So you will be able to figure out which chapter is being talked about, and you can flip through the book after that. Okay. And Abhishek, Iceland developing through coral reefs always have void region at the center. Iceland or island? If you're talking about islands, so islands, when they develop through coral reefs, why will they have a void? You are talking about atolls. So atolls that you are talking about, that will generally, the atolls not all always will they have a circular structure. In many of the cases, the atolls will have a linear structure also, where, let's suppose, there was a linear mountain range, and that mountain range underwent subsidence. So the fringing reefs on the side of the mountains, they were left behind there itself. As the other land simply sunk, that was left over and remaining over. So in that case, it will be wrong to have a conclusion that always there is a void in center. You can also have the formation of atolls in a manner which is quite significantly linear. Okay, so that is something which you have to keep in mind. I hope that is understood. And Pavitra, please provide privileges to take the screenshot. I don't think I can provide the privileges. I think it is up to the tech team to take a look into it. And only climatology and oceanography from world and Indian geography. Even geomorphology. Geomorphology, climatology, oceanography, and Indian geography. You cover that along with the current affairs, more than sufficient for your exam. Pratik, still I'm fully dependent on PPT and not reading the NCRTs. So as of now, Pratik, cover the PPTs. Significant details are provided in the PPTs themselves. After that, you will revise. I hope you will revise at some point of time or the other. I hope we are not having the expectation with the same information I'm going to go into the exam hall. While carrying out the revision, take up the recorded lectures that you have, the tablet lectures that you have. They are also in very significant detail. I would urge all of you to take a look at those tablet lectures. I understand many of you have never taken a look at those tablet lectures. So use the tablet lectures, at least for the subject of geography. I can assure you that in the subject of geography, the tablet lectures that have been provided are so very detailed for each of the topics. It can serve as your point of revision, right? And that will help you, that will give you a kind of a particular greater edge also, so you can follow that process. But after you have completed the PPT, then take a look at the recorded lecture or the NCRT, any of them. Okay. Then in geography, questions will come from world geography are coming in prelims weightage. Questions will come from world geography are coming in prelims weightage. From world geography, you don't have questions coming in the prelims. You have map pointing, which does come, but map pointing is purely dependent upon the portion of current affairs. That is where all the map pointing questions they are asked from. Okay, so it is not as if from world geography you'll find a question that where is Murray-Darling Basin situated? Is it situated in Africa, Australia, New Zealand, or North America? That kind of questions are not asked. Okay, and Western Ghat having different kind of species than Eastern Ghat. Why? Obviously, the type of species in Western Ghats, is it same as the Himalayas? No. If it is not same as the Himalayas, then why is it that we can expect the same species to be existent in Eastern Ghat and Western Ghat? In the case of Western Ghats, the temperature is different. The amount of moisture present is different. If the temperature and amount of moisture is different, that means the type of vegetation will be different. Once the type of trees or the vegetation will be different, that means the species who are basically inhabiting on those vegetation, you will not find in Eastern Ghats and vice versa. For example, red sanders is a variety of wood or tree that you find in the Eastern Ghats. You don't find it in the Western Ghats at all, right? Similarly, in the dense vegetation of Western Ghats, you find various different types of monkeys, hornbills, etc. because of dense vegetation. And that dense vegetation is not present in Eastern Ghats, so you won't find those species there. So, because when the vegetation in itself is different, when the temperature is different, why will the species be same? Okay. Uh, Shiva, today in Hindu on the cloud seeding research report, they said that clouds on summer monsoon formed over 500 to 1500-meter altitude, while during the monsoon break, it forms over at an altitude of 2000 meter. So, see, low level clouds are created when you have acute or intense low pressure on the ground. Remember when we talked about the creation or the existence of break in monsoon? Why does the break in monsoon happen? Let's suppose a region has received heavy rainfall, right? Now, heavy rainfall, when we say, the cloud cover would extend right very close to the ground surface, 500 meter to 1 kilometer from the ground surface, they would be extending significantly for 5 to 6 kilometers above it. So that will bring heavy intense rainfall. Now, during that heavy intense rainfall, the lower level clouds, they are used up in bringing the rain, and that lowers the temperature of that area also, which is receiving the rainfall. So when that region becomes cooler, that develops a comparative high pressure. So when that comparative high pressure is developed, so then You won't have any convection process in that region to reform the clouds again. So the lower level clouds which have been consumed, which have been utilized to bring rainfall, they won't be refurbished quickly again. You will only be left over with the clouds which are left over at a higher altitude, because they would not have brought that sufficient amount of rainfall. Okay. And that is why, in the case of the monsoon breaks, you will observe the whitish clouds or the grayish clouds high up, as compared to when you have intense rainfall. So that is what your phase of monsoon breaks are about. Is that due to the intense low pressure provided for the formation of clouds? At yes, almost. Okay. I hope that is understood, Shiva. Manisha, सर जी मेरा मीडियम चेंज नहीं हुआ. Okay. Manisha, do one thing. Send a mail to you. Do one thing. You mark me in the mail also. You. I hope you have my mail ID. And okay, send a mail to me. I will take care of it today itself. Okay. I will ensure that by tomorrow it is taken care of. Don't worry. Shweta, we asked out in Hindi also. I would suggest you not to do that. In her case, her medium in itself is Hindi, but then if you are unable to convey your doubt properly, fair enough. It is important to get your doubt resolved. Okay. But then again, I don't have proficiency over many other languages, so there will be a kind of a limitation. I would always advise you, please do express your doubts in English itself. At least you will get that practice of trying to express what you are thinking about. Okay. In prelims, match the following in picture based question, always coming in every year, like P waves and S waves, and river in match the following, and mountains. Kindly suggest important topics related to it. So while you were analyzing the PYQs there, Benjita, did you observe any repetition in that? That this particular area UPSC has asked multiple times, this particular area UPSC has asked these many times. There is not such a kind of a trend. When it comes to physiography, in physiography, UPSC will ask you about a particular location, let's suppose Maikal range, and which region is it found in, right? Or Vidyas, where they are extended in. About rivers, UPSC, whenever it has asked a question, it is about a river which has been in news, a river or a tributary which has been in discussion. Okay, that is where you have the match the following. And P and S wave type question, which was asked this year, that can hardly be thought to be categorized as match the following. It was a straightforward conceptual question. Okay, so please don't try to form a trend here. Understand, guys, please understand one basic thing. I understand that at your preparation stage the mind works in very mysterious ways, and other than studying the basics, mind goes around in all the loops and corners. Understand and trust me, cover the basics very thoroughly, what we have covered in the class. After that, reach for the stars if you want, but cover the basics in the class. Trust me, after you cover it, if you revise it at least once or twice, majority of the prelims question you will be able to solve. Obviously, current affairs is an addition that I'm sure you are doing on a daily basis, and you will be much well armed in current affairs by the time that we reach around March, April, or May. Okay, so that will be your regular edition of it. That will cater to the match the following kind of questions in the prelims that you are scared of. Okay, so that is all that is required. Please do not panic. Wait for this to get over, cover the basic syllabus, and repeat it again and again. Okay. Pratik, also you have the same question. uh, how to solve match the column type of question, because new option pattern I make wrong. So, see, when you commit mistakes, it is either you did not know the content or you got confused. These are the only two reasons why you commit mistakes. So, get very clear. If you have gotten confused, you are reading something wrong there, so that means you need more practice. If you are lacking content, look at the explanation of that question and then add on to your knowledge arsenal. From now on to the time of your examination, that is where I'm telling you, and I will repeat it for the final time. Maybe I will have to repeat it next Saturday also. What differentiates people who succeed in the exam and people who don't succeed in the exam is not the books that they have studied, is the process that they have followed. Okay, everybody studies the same books. You will be very surprised to know, and you will be very surprised to find out, you will find out at some stage of your life, and I hope, I sincerely hope by that time it is not too late. You will find out that you will have lakhs of people who go through many different types of books for the preparation, and they keep on repeating the examination year after year after year after year. But you will find people covering the basic books multiple times, getting rank 4, rank 5, rank 7, rank 11, rank 15 in the first attempt or the second attempt. So decide which category you want to be in, right? So it is not as if you have the expectation that in order to qualify for the prelims, I need to get 100 answers correct. That if you have that approach or mentality, trust me, you will not succeed. Because the problem is we have been conditioned with that approach since our childhood days. That approach for 100, you will reach 85, you are good to go. UPSC prelims is very different from your board exams, from your graduation exams. UPSC is a game of accretion. It is a game where you basically keep on adding to the knowledge. So from now till the, let's suppose you are appearing for the prelims next year, I expect you to carry out your revision at least 4 to 5 times in that time period. And you would be taking at least 20 to 30 tests of the test series. 20 to 30 tests means approximately 2000 to 3000 questions you will be solving. Out of those, I'm sure around 1000 to 2000 questions would provide you newer set of information which you have not come across before in any of the book. So that is where you will add that a set of information to your existing knowledge arsenal. That, okay, now I know something more. Then when you go into the exam hall armed with all those information, then you will have a better shot at the prelims examination. It is not like your class 7th examination, that this is the book that you read, all the questions are going to come from this book only. So I have to cover 5 books. Whether I cover it in March, whether I cover it in July, I will get questions from only those 5 books. This is civil services examination. This is as serious as it gets. Okay, so please understand the gravity of the situation. And if you understand the gravity of the situation, you will never have the question in your mind that if this book is sufficient or not, if that book is sufficient or not, because then you will be thinking beyond the level of the books. That coverage of the books, multiple revision of the same book, more than sufficient. Is there any negative marks in prelims? Yes, my dear friend, there is a negative marks in prelims. I would advise you kindly take a look at what kind of questions are asked in the prelims, what kind of questions are framed in the mains examination. At least that much idea you should have in order to understand which portions to stress upon, which what is the language used by UPSC. So you should get yourself familiarized with the question, regardless of whether you know the answers or not. Whichever optional that you are thinking of selecting, take a look at the questions there. So that is the ideal approach that any serious candidate should have. Okay. Now we move ahead with the portion of location and physiographic division of India. Now, this is going to be relevant both for your prelims as well as for your mains examination. In the prelims examination, you get questions about physiographic divisions, their features and locations. Location. Okay. And then in the mains examination, you also get current affairs based maps. any region which has been in news, chances are UPSC might ask you to locate that. Okay, where is Malwa Plateau? It will not provide you with a map, but it will ask you that Malwa Plateau, whether it is situated in Bihar or Odisha, or whether it is actually situated in the region of Madhya Pradesh. So that kind of a question can be asked. And it completely is derived from which are the areas in news, in discussion. In the mains, UPSC has been asking many questions from this particular area. So, for example, features of physiographic division, then after that, delta formation, or rather, lack of delta formation in Western Ghats, right? Landslides in Himalayas. Why is it that more landslides happen in Himalayas? This is a question that UPSC has repeated in the mains multiple number of times. So that kind of question is asked. And also, I would tell you that for the portion of Indian geography, the questions which are asked, you will not find a question in the mains examination which completely stumps you out, that you have no clue where this question has come from. Because obviously, you would have known your country in a much better way. So, you will generally get questions that you will have an approach to. But once you study it, obviously, that gets more sharpened. For example, the questions, the type of questions that are asked in general are, what are the changes or what are the issues happening due to rapid urban development? What are the various different problems which are faced because of that? So for this, you don't need any book to give you an idea. Okay, your general awareness is more than sufficient, and whatever you have observed in your surrounding, in your vicinity, more than sufficient. Even for example, how is it that rapid rail transportation can change the paradigm of urban mobility, and why is that required? So for all this, you don't get the content from any book which is out there, because these are new developments which keep on happening. So that is where apply your logic, that okay, a very fast mobility means people can settle in far off places. That means decongestion of the cities. That means wherever people are staying, there the economy will start growing up, because there the demand will be created, service sector can get created, a proper uniform distribution of economic goods. So like that, you can always bring out the points on your own, provided you have observed your surroundings. So that is what even UPSC is focusing on. If I were to tell you the present trend of the questions, see, everybody tells you that that UPSC has become very difficult. True, indeed, the paper has become slightly tougher in the prelims, but mains has gotten much easier now. All that you need to do is clear the prelims, and that is where the cutoff has come very, very low. And the changes that UPSC is bringing is to weed out those candidates who are very good at mugging up the books. That is why UPSC is either changing the type of questions, even if it is asking directly from the book, it is twisting it in such a way so as to confuse the candidates, or it is picking up the topics from the book and asking a different question altogether, so as to take a look at your applicability, mental applicability at that particular pressure situation, whether you are able to maintain your sanity or not. So that is the trend of the questions which are coming. You have to adapt yourself accordingly. Okay. Okay, one question that I missed out. Then we will proceed further. Abhishek, you had the question that please explain how scientists have been successfully developed artificial cloud. What type of cloud do they develop? So they develop mostly cumulus kind of clouds. So that is done by what is referred to as the cloud seeding prospect also. So in many of the areas, what happens is that condensation is not initiated very quickly. So evaporation or convection from the ground is continuously happening, but condensation is not happening, due to which a dense cloud is not getting created. So you will have some condensation happening here, some condensation happening 1 kilometer away, some condensation happening 5 kilometers away. So when you have that dispersed condensation happening, means you don't have a dense cloud which can bring rainfall. So what the scientists or the climatologists they end up doing is they utilize the property of a hygroscopic nuclei which can basically attract the water molecules, allow it a surface on which it can condense. So they start spraying material such as silver iodide, and that silver iodide, when it is sprayed over, so that provides, it is very light, and it is basically suspended almost at a similar level, and that is when condensation happens in one particular area. So then you have a density of the cloud which is actually desirable for precipitation to happen, and that is what causes rainfall. Okay, I hope that is understood. Himaja, is the syllabus different for prelims and mains? No, the syllabus is quite the same. The type of questions which are asked in prelims and mains are very different. Okay. Now, now we move ahead to India, its location, and also the physiographic divisions of the country. Now, when we talk about India, it is also referred to as a subcontinent. Not many countries in the world, they are known by this particular name of a subcontinent. But when we talk about our country, the land, the land in itself is a glowing representation of a living civilization. Civilization as old as we can find the evidences of. Because every now and then we find a new archaeological evidence somewhere or the other that pushes back the age of the civilization quite significantly. So even we don't know how old this civilization is, how old the land is. But we do know that this is a land of diversity. From north to south, from east to west, we come across not only different land types, from mountains to the some of the highest mountain peaks across the world, to very pristine and clear beaches, from islands which stretch far away from the mainland into the middle of the sea, to very vast fertile plains which are very productive almost throughout the year, from vast expanses of Thar desert of absolute dry condition. And when you go to the east, you come across the regions such as Cherrapunji and Mosindram, where the amount of rainfall is amongst the highest in the world. India truly is a land of diversity. And it is because of this diversity, it is because of this particular variation that India has got a lot to offer to almost anyone and everyone. That is why historically, people would always try their luck from abroad to come to India. Many of them would find certain excuses to come to India and gain a foothold. But majority of them would try to come here. And other or in comparison to the other civilizations where the civilizations have been altered by the people coming in, India is known as the melting pot of civilizations. People from the Central Asian region, from West Asian region, from various different areas they have come in. They have made this land their own. They have called this land their home. And not only their style has changed when they come here, they have basically provided an addition, a supplement to Indian civilization and Indian culture. What we have today is basically a sum product of what we have been assimilating for the past thousands of years. This is a land which is a subcontinent. This is a land which represents variation in every few kilometers that you travel. It is famously said that language in India changes every 100 kilometer. It is true. Language changes, the literature changes, the culture changes, the customs, the beliefs, the tradition changes, the food habits they change, the deities, the gods that we believe in, that changes. And why does that happen? Because of geography of this country. Because when you are living in a region which is across the coastal area, you will have a very different kind of an economic activity, very different kind of an outlook, and as compared to a region which is significantly present inland, which is dependent on cultivation of crops. you will have a very different outlook of life. You will have very different kind of beliefs, customs, traditions in your life. So that is why we say we are a living civilization unparalleled, where the civilization has continued to uh, carry on its beliefs, faiths, and customs for more than thousands of years. And that is something which is very Indian. That is why, when you have the question, why is India known as a subcontinent? The answer is not because of the size, because of its reach, etc. No. United States is bigger than India. Canada is much bigger than India. Australia is bigger than India. Australia is a continent, fair enough. But the other larger countries, they are not referred to as a subcontinent. But in India, you have that diversity of culture, diversity of food, diversity of clothing practices, diversity of occupation, diversity of economic outlook. That diversity is present. And that is all what makes a continent, isn't it? And that is why we are regarded as a subcontinent. Now, as I have already told you, historically, there had always, in the geographical community, there had always been a kind of a tendency that if you want to know or study about the world, just study India. Understand understand Indian geography, and the world will automatically come to you. So that is the level of finesse, that is the level of variation that this land offers to the world. And that is what even UPSC wants you to know about. That is why you are basically, in a way, bound to know about the portions of geomorphology, climatology, oceanography in order to know India better. Now, we are talking about a country, we are talking about a land which sits proudly atop the Indian Ocean. You have various different areas, countries across the world. Nowhere will you find a country having its name given to the ocean, or a country thinking about the ocean as its own backyard. So, sitting atop Indian Ocean, India is poised to take advantage of the next phase of global growth. Yes, at one point of time, we did have a considerable stake in global economy, which has diminished over a period of time. At one point of time, we were the legal or the leading luminaries when it came to aspects of value inculcation of education, etc. But that decayed a long time back. Now, as the world re-emerges from the shadow of colonialism once again, that is when countries like India, they have got their opportunity under the sun. And as famously quoted, that the 1800s belong to the countries which were situated across the Atlantic. The 1900s belong to the countries situated across the Pacific. In terms of developmental parameters, in terms of economic development, and so on, the 20th century or the 21st century, that is a century for the Indian Ocean. 21st century is a century of Asia. Now, being an important member of the Asian community and being a very important member of the region of Indian Ocean, India is in the ideal place to take advantage of that. And that is what we are looking at going ahead in the future. And in fact, for that matter, we are significantly fortunate enough to have been born at that particular point of time, where maybe, possibly in our own lifetime, we will observe, we will experience India taking that next step in that global growth paradigm. Something that we have seen China do it, something that various different countries have done over the past. We are living at that opportune moment where in the next 20, 30 years, India will take that next step. So that is the importance of this. Now, the location of this country, that is also very unique. India has got a very long coastline of more than around 7,000 kilometers. As one of the very great thinkers, strategic thinkers, Alfred Mahan, had once famously remarked, one who controls the sea controls the land and controls the world. So, access to sea and access to warm waters has always been a strategic dilemma that large powers have basically struggled against. Very large powers, all that they would want continuously is that access to sea, so that they can carry out their trading processes, etc., very easily. Now, India, across both the coastline along with the islands, we have that access to the sea. Sitting atop the Indian Ocean, we are situated in a location where majority of the oceanic trade goes through. Almost 90% of trade by volume traverses through seas. And a significant majority of that trade now is coming over from the region of Indian Ocean. And as this trade moves from the region of Gulf of Aden or from the Suez Canal all the way to Malacca Strait, it passes very close from the Indian coastline. That is where the Indian coastline and the development of the new ports which are happening, that provides a very unique set of opportunities in terms of economic development, in terms of people to people connect, cultural exchanges, etc. But then location also provides us with a certain set of responsibility. Any particular nation in the Indian Ocean region, whenever they suffer from any kind of humanitarian crisis, India is amongst the first responders, regardless of whatever their policy has been. For example, right now, what you would be witnessing in Maldives is that a new government or a new regime is coming in with a clear mindset of hostility towards India. But trust me, God forbid, if any disaster would strike Maldives, India would be the first respondent. We pride ourselves in giving significant amount of importance and prominence to the human values, the values that are cherished. That is why, regardless of the hostilities that had already developed with Nepal, when the earthquake struck in Nepal, India was amongst the first responders. Within an hour of earthquake, you already had teams from NDRF landing in Kathmandu. When earthquake struck in Turkey, now Turkey and India, we don't have a good relationship out there. We have a pretty acrimonious relationship, to put it very mildly. Turkey ensures that it will, in a way, instigate India quite significantly and quite frequently. But still, when the earthquake does strike, India is amongst the first responders. So that is where our geopolitical reach is quite significant, and our geopolitical reach is very much required. Now, the location of the country also ensures some amount of strategic advantage which is simply unparalleled. For example, having an island so close to the region of Malacca Strait, that provides India with a choke point. What is a choke point? So, wherever you have the trade which is going on, if you choke that area, the trade can come to a stop. So, from the region of Great Nicobar to the region of the Indonesian islands, the majority of the trade passes through this region, the trade which is actually aimed to reach China. All that trade passes through this region. Now, India's location is such and so very strategic that if push comes to shove, we have the ability, our Navy has got the ability to induce a complete halt of sea traffic in that area. That would in itself bring a stop to the trade which is being carried out by China on the eastern coast. And that would stifle the Chinese economy of the much needed oil. That is what is the ace or the card that India holds. And that is one of the flashpoints that China doesn't want to trigger. That is the reason why you would find desperate attempts by the Chinese Navy. Chinese Navy has become quite significantly large in the past few years. Chinese Navy, that they keep on sending vessels and ships across the various areas of Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean. They want to map out the ocean floor so that they can sneak in their submarines and they can have some amount of advantage, or they can take back some amount of advantage that India already possesses. But we already have that advantage. We have the economic advantage in terms of the sea floor of Indian Ocean or the ocean bed, which is riddled with many minerals. We have the right to exploit minerals across a large area of 1,000 square kilometers and more. Close to around 10,000 square kilometers is the area for which we have the permit. Thereby, we have that strategic advantage. Push did come to shove during the 2017 Doklam crisis. Push did come to shove during the 2020 Galwan crisis. In both these cases, it was the Indian Navy's deployment in the region around Andaman Nicobar, that is the Andaman Nicobar theater, which significantly threatened Chinese balance of trade in terms of economy. And that is one of the heavy hands. When the Kargil war did extend for more than 30 days, what was estimated, Indian Navy was very close to blocking the entirety of the Pakistani coast because our location allows us to do that. And Indian Navy was thinking about a blockade like this, so that any ship, any vessel trying to enter into the Pakistani territory or their ports, they would have to pass through the blockade of the Indian ships and they would not have allowed to do so. And that would have meant crippling the economy at its very knees. So, that is basically the geostrategic advantage that India definitely holds. And that advantage that India holds is purely attributable to its location. That is the advantage. But not only over the water areas, even over the land areas. Our location is quite significantly unique. In fact, through multiple different states, we have access to international border. Other than the regions such as Haryana, Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Telangana, all the states that you will find, they share an international boundary. So that provides us with a significantly unique amount of flexibility. Also, if you observe what China is doing, China is trying to build another alternate port at Gwadar in Pakistan through the help of the China Pakistan Economic Corridor. Why? Because China wants to escape that choke point that India holds at Malacca Strait. China wants to diversify its trading routes other than the areas that the eastern coast of China has, where all the population is settled. And that is where, again, India has got a significant advantage even in the region of the western coastline. Historically, that has come to use. Even 2000 years back, if you take a look at the records of the trading carried out by the Roman Empire, Indian ports were mentioned there. And Indian ports were mentioned in the sense that this is one trade that we are carrying out, the Romans were carrying out, where the Romans were shelling out money. They did not have anything to give in return for what India did produce. So, our ports have been the centers of wealth accumulation across the eastern coastline. There has been a long history, there has been a long tradition of us being able to influence the culture, the civilization in the regions such as Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, in all these areas because of our accessibility to Bay of Bengal. For the Cholas, the mighty Cholas, one of the mightiest kingdoms that India has ever seen, what was the common thinking at that point of time? That they had converted Bay of Bengal as their own domestic lake. That was their strategic control over that area. And that was purely provided by the location of it. To the north, we have the Himalayan frontier, one of possibly one of the harshest and one of the toughest boundaries that any particular country can have. Historically, various different types of groups, clans, kingdoms, they have tried to invade the country, but the frontier of Himalayas, they have protected us. Himalayas, they basically shape the climate and the country in such a way that India indeed is a true representation of a subcontinent. Himalayas, they are the source of the mighty rivers which end up feeding crores of population based upon the economic activities that they generate. So that is where our location, our physiography is something which is very unique, which you have to understand, we have to realize is a unique opportunity that we have. Not many countries in the world, they have that uniqueness. Talk about any mineral, talk about any particular crop, talk about any particular kind of soil. We do find that in India. Now, even when we talk about countries such as Nepal, Bhutan, now they are our very close neighbors, very close. allies also in most of the cases. Now, even when they have to carry out their trade, despite the fact that China is developing a trade route connecting Kathmandu to its eastern coastline, there is no denying the fact that the shortest route to the port is provided by India. If Nepal has to carry out a trade, if Bhutan has to carry out a trade, they have to cross the Indian territory. That is the advantage that India again has. So, this is a kind of a geostrategic and geopolitical advantage that India has owing to its locational identity, owing to its locational presence. And that is the advantage that we have to utilize going ahead into the future. Okay, so that is where we will basically be studying about India. We'll be familiarizing ourselves with what India is and what the different regions are. What are the various different types of diversities that the people that you have? That is something that you come across in your day to day interactions and your day to day information gathering that you do. But the location of a place, the geography of a place, is enough to shape the history of that region. And once the history of the region is shaped, that in a way seals the destiny or the fate of that area. And if you take a look at any of the regions of the country, be it the drier Vidarbha region of Maharashtra, or be it significantly hilly areas in Northeast, now the economic activities in that area, the customs traditions in that area, have a very intricate relationship with the geographical realities of that location as well. Okay, so why I have talked about this is because UPSC does ask you a question about the geostrategic advantage of India's location, where you have to balance out not only in terms of the might and the power that we have, but also the humanitarian aspect that we hold, right? When it comes to disaster relief rescue, India is amongst the forefront and the front runners in providing that. So that is where the geopolitics and the geostrategy comes into place. You had a question asked in essay once, essay paper, about what are the advantages that India has sitting atop the Indian Ocean. So there you can always inculcate the quotation of Alfred Mahan. You can inculcate the quotation of Mohammad Gayoom, Maldivian president, who had made the statement about the 19th century belonging to the Atlantic, the 20th century belonging to the Pacific, 21st century will belong to the Indian Ocean, and India sits atop that. Okay. Now, that is where we shall be having the initial stages above. Now, when we talk about location, India is a country situated in northern hemisphere. We are aware of that. The latitudinal extent of the country is from 8 degree 4 minutes north and 37 degree 6 minutes north latitude, whereas the longitudinal extent is from 68 degree 7 minutes east to 97 degree 25 minutes east. So north to south or east to west extent is largely very similar. Now, the southernmost point of the country is in the region of Andaman Nicobar Islands, that is your Indira Point. That is situated at 6 degree 45 minutes north. That is the location of Indira Point. So if you take a look at it, this is where 8 degrees 4 minute north in the region of Kanyakumari, and this is where you have 6 degree 45 minutes north. That is the portion of the Indira Point in Andaman Nicobar Islands. Now, here you can see that the north to south stretch is around 3214 kilometers, whereas the east to west stretch is again around 2933. So, largely similar. So, that is why the time zone that we have chosen, or the meridian that we have chosen to represent Indian time, roughly passes through the central part of the country. This is your standard meridian. It is 82 degree 30 minutes east. That is the standard meridian which follows the Indian Standard Time. And we do know that Indian Standard Time or IST, it is GMT plus 5.5. Okay. So that is basically your Indian Standard Time. Now, for your prelims, you should be aware that which are the states that the standard meridian passes through, which are the states that Tropic of Cancer passes through. You should be aware of that. For example, for Tropic of Cancer, which are the states that it passes through? Passes through which of these states? You have Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, right? West Bengal. Then after that, Tripura and Mizoram. So you should be aware of this. Okay. These particular states you should be aware of that where in these states the Tropic of Cancer passes through. Now, India is divided by Tropic of Cancer in almost two equal parts, and that is, as we have seen, how that has shaped our climate. Had India been completely to the north of Tropic of Cancer, our conditions would have been very different. ITCZ would have never reached us. So we would never have received monsoonal rainfall. Had India completely been to the south of Tropic of Cancer, we would have a kind of a consistent 30-35 degrees Celsius temperature throughout the year, with rainfall on the coastal area and the central portions being very dry. So that is why even this particular locational aspect does shape our climate, and that does shape our overall way of life also. Now, standard meridian, as I told you, also passes through Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, and Andhra Pradesh. So this is also something which is relevant for your exam. So there are two states from which both Tropic of Cancer as well as the standard meridian passes through. There are two such states. Which are those? MP and Chhattisgarh. Through these states, both standard meridian and Tropic of Cancer passes through. But there is one state where they will coincide, they will intersect in one state, and that is Chhattisgarh. So, Tropic of Cancer and the standard meridian, they crisscross each other in Chhattisgarh. This kind of a question can be framed. Okay, that where do they crisscross each other, in which state do they crisscross each other? Is it MP, is it UP, is it Chhattisgarh, is it Jharkhand, is it the neighboring areas? So that kind of a question you have to be, or Odisha, that kind of a question you have to be prepared of. Okay, so here standard meridian crosses the Tropic of Cancer at Chhattisgarh. Okay, that crosses the Tropic of Cancer at Chhattisgarh. Now, let us take a look at India and its neighbors. So, when we talk about our neighbors, we have a very large land boundary as well, and an equally significantly larger, if not more, a maritime boundary as well. Both land boundary and maritime boundary, both of them are international borders. The problem is that from our childhood days, when we have thought about border, we have only thought about one country. So when we think that, okay, this is not a country having a land border, or this is not a region having a land border, means no international border. Land or maritime border, both of them are international borders. So, longest border that we share with a country, that is Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the one with which we have the longest boundary, right? Land boundary. Now, when we take a look at our neighbors over the land, in case of the land boundary, we have the neighbors from Bangladesh. When we go to the east of the country, we have Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, Bhutan, Nepal, then Afghanistan also, and then comes Pakistan. Whereas over our maritime areas, we have the boundaries, and rather we have our neighbors in the form of Maldives and Sri Lanka. They form our maritime neighbors. Okay, so that is basically the boundary situation, the boundary scenario. Now, here also, when we talk about the various different states, you have many states, for example, such as West Bengal. West Bengal shares its border with three different countries: Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. Arunachal Pradesh shares its border with three countries again: Myanmar, China or Tibet, and then Bhutan. Right? So you have many such states which share multiple different international borders. So that again becomes relevant for your mapping portion in your prelims. Other than the region of or the state of Haryana, region of Delhi, then the state of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, and Telangana. Other than these, all the other states, they share an international boundary of their own. While the largest land boundary that India has is with Bangladesh, the shortest of the land boundary that we have is with Afghanistan. We do share a boundary with Afghanistan, even though not really on the present ground scenario, but on paper, we do share a land boundary with Afghanistan through the very famed Wakhan corridor. So, what is this Wakhan corridor? And where is it that we share basically? In Tropic of Cancer, I did not mention Chhattisgarh in the previous slide. Are you able to see now? Is it visible? Chhattisgarh, CG. Which other state will be referred? Okay, so should I write the full form of that? This is Rajasthan. This is Madhya Pradesh. I thought this would be understood. This is Chhattisgarh. This is Jharkhand. This is West Bengal. Are you are you happy now? Is this understood? Okay. Then Sidhya, you have a question, Madhya Pradesh question mark. I don't know what the question is. Are you asking about the location of it or is there anything else? Um, why do we not consider Indonesia as our maritime neighbor as it is near to Andaman Nicobar? A very, very good and pertinent question. And that in itself reflects the kind of strategic short sightedness that we have had for a long period of time, where we have not considered Andaman Nicobar Islands as a part of the mainland India. So that is why Andaman Nicobar Islands, while significantly lacking development also, we have not been able to develop might in that area as well. But now, for the past a couple of decades, so to say, the situation has been changing. That is why you would have observed that a few years back, India entered into an agreement about port sharing at Dakkam Port. Dakkam Port is very close here. So that also India did. So basically, and also in the region around Indonesia, also multiple different port areas is where the Navy is making frequent visits. But yes, you can consider that also. Fair enough. That is a strategic short-sightedness because of not consider or only considering the mainland. That is why. Okay. Akshay, you had a long question. Why China has been so dominating over BRI initiative to outscore India's dominance in that region? India never had a dominance in that area, to be very fair. India, it is not as if India had a significant dominance in that area. We were just one of the leading powers in the area. But China has got money. Wherever you have money, whichever country has got money, they will always have a dominating role to play. Why is it that US has got such a dominating role to play across the world? It has got money. China has been experiencing ever since the time of Deng Xiaoping in the 70s. Then China has been experiencing a kind of an economic boom, a kind of a current account surplus for multiple years, trade surplus. We have already always, when you hear the economic terms, you hear the trade deficit. Very rarely have we managed to achieve trade surplus. China has been playing in trade surplus for decades now. That is why it has got trillions of dollars of forex, and that is why the economy is at least 6 times the size of Indian economy. So obviously, it will have a greater maneuvering power. So will China use it to attack us? China would. Why would China want to attack India? For all that it is concerned, basically China is going to lose some economic resources by attacking India. It would be much more economically advantageous for China what it is doing today. That is deploying or ensuring the deployment of Indian troops, Indian resources, and Indian logistical economic might at the border areas. So that does involve significant amount of our or significant amount of resources, right? So China is having India at a place that it wants it to be. If China wants to attack India, then there is no stopping it from doing that because China presently has got that military advantage as well. And Sidhya, standard meridian is not passing through Madhya Pradesh as shown in the map. It touches the region boundary areas of Madhya Pradesh. That is why even Madhya Pradesh is counted. The boundary district of Madhya Pradesh is where it passes through. Okay. Now, here basically, longest border is with Bangladesh and the shortest border is with Afghanistan. Now, when we talk about the border with Afghanistan, this is the region here in the northwestern part of Jammu Kashmir where you have the border with Afghanistan. Now, the argument which is made by our neighbor, that is Pakistan, has always been that look, you don't control that territory anymore. Fair enough. That part comes under Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Pakistan occupied territory. But in all fairness, as per our constitution, as per our parliament, as per our national will and purposes, we consider this as a part of our own territory. So that is why we do consider Afghanistan to be our natural neighbor. That is one of the arguments that India always puts forward in whichever global forum that it manages to participate in. Wherever the fate of Afghanistan is to be decided, India puts this point vehemently forward that look, we are a natural neighbor of Afghanistan. What happens in Afghanistan naturally will impact us also. So we should be a significant, important stakeholder in deciding the future of that particular region. And that is also that exact point is also made by Pakistan to ensure that India is not a part of any of these international dialogues for negotiation about the future of Pakistan, for future of Afghanistan, because Pakistan always makes it a point that look, you are not a neighbor of Afghanistan. What you are saying as a boundary, that is our land, that is the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So there is nothing connecting you to Afghanistan. So why should you have a say in Afghanistan? Now, Afghanistan shares a kind of a panhandle shaped land as the border with India. When I say panhandle, so just in a very literal translation, just like you have a pan, a cooking pan, and you have a handle about it, so it has got a similar shape associated. That panhandle shaped region of Afghanistan, that this region of Afghanistan that you see, this is your Wakhan corridor. UPSC has asked this question earlier also, where it has given the portion or the question as match the following: Wakhan corridor, then Iran, then Zaydaran region, Afghanistan. So, like that, UPSC has asked this question. So, you should be aware where the Wakhan corridor is. Now, this Wakhan corridor has been very important historically because if you take a look at the geography of the region, immediately to the south of it, you have mighty ranges of Karakoram, right? Karakoram ranges having a height of 7,000 meters and above on an average in that area. Very hostile landmass, impossible to crisscross from east to west or west to east. Then, when you move to the north of it, to the north of this, where you have the Pamir North, and again the mountains, it is impossible to pass through that area as well. So, Wakhan corridor provides the passageway if you have to move from west to east and vice versa. That is why, historically, this is a land route which has been used by the traders and merchants of Europe in order to carry out their trading activities and practices in far off places, such as China. You would have heard about the very famed name of Marco Polo, the Venetian traveler. Now, Marco Polo initially visited China in the court of whom? All of you would have studied history by now. Okay, you might not have studied this. So, Marco Polo, he visited China in the court of Kublai Khan, the Mongol ruler. Now, Marco Polo very famously documents his passage through the Wakhan corridor. So that is how historic the Wakhan corridor has been. That is why people in this area, traditionally, if you observe, this is a region occupied by the Pashtuns in general. They have a kind of a nomadic way of life also, where their entire lifestyle, economic activity is dependent upon a kind of a nomadic lifestyle where you move depending upon where the population is, wherever the economic opportunities is, you tend to move from one place to another. You will find a lot of traders to be present in that area, the historical traders, right? Now, in the present geopolitical scenario, where China had constructed the Karakoram Highway way back in 1959 and 1960, China had basically built a highway through the region of Karakoram Pass, entering into the region of Pakistan, and then moving on into the area of the various different territories of Pakistan. Now, China has cemented further this particular highway in its endeavor of China Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now, as a result of that, India has basically activated its airfields in this area. The Daulat Beg Oldie airfield that we have, DBO airfield, it is one of the highest airfields that India operates. It is one of the northernmost airfields that India operates. It is only around 8 kilometers from the Karakoram Pass, which is very critical for China's trading activities. So, when you have an airfield close around 8 kilometers from Karakoram Pass, obviously there is a threat. So that is why China, what it is planning to do now is it can basically be it is basically endeavoring to construct a corridor, a tunnel through the region of the Wakhan corridor, so as to provide it with an unhindered passage to Pakistan, thereby allowing it to reach the Arabian Sea. Okay, so this is the present geopolitical changes and tiffs that are happening. That is why China is hell bent to improve its relations with Afghanistan, because obviously Chinese workers will also find job. Chinese economy will grow by there are a lot of minerals in Afghanistan that China is having a very significantly deep look into, and also in order to enhance the infrastructure building in this area. Okay, China has a wide history of annexing other regions such as Tibet, Mongolia, Aksai Chin, and now Taiwan, plus shown in its new map. I don't want to venture into the syllabus of IR, so I will refrain from that. But think about it, everything has got a kind of a precedence. Nobody takes any action out of sheer sense of madness out there. There's a purpose behind it. Why is it that China is annexing these areas? Why is it that year after year, China has to release these particular maps showing Arunachal Pradesh as its own, showing Taiwan as its own? This is not the first time that China has done that. Many of you would be aware of it now because it has made so much amount of splash or news in social media networks that many of you would be aware that now China has done that. China has been doing that for a long time now. Historically, I don't recall a time where China has published its map, and that this is something that China does annually, by the way. Okay, so Historically, I don't remember or recall a time when China has given or drawn a map, published a map, not showing the Arunachal Pradesh and Askai Chin region as its own. It has always indicated it as its own territory. There's a reason for that. And the reason, what you will, whenever you hear any of the presidential address made by Xi Jinping or the CPC meeting that they have, all of them, they refer to the 1900s or the 20th century as a century of humiliation, right? So the tendency is, the mindset which the larger generation and the population of China is, that we have been humiliated by the colonial powers throughout the 1900s. And once you study more about the Second World War, what happened actually in the region of Manchuria, how is it that the colonial powers basically they battled it out, and it was just about who takes more land from China, who takes more resources from China. That is where that grievance is coming from. Just like we have a grievance, all of us, we have a grievance that the Britishers, they ruined our way of life, they ruined our society, they ruined our country. They also have that grievance. So that is where they are trying to have that resurgence, and that is the root cause of the annexation. But again, I won't go into the portion of IR. I leave it for some other module and leave it for the portion of IR. I'm sure you will have much better information there. But for any foreign policy measure, there's always a historic reason. Priya, it is to be said that as a civil services aspirant, you need to be optimistic always. How can we be optimistic with country like Pakistan? Only by the humanitarian ground with civilians of Pakistan. See, fair enough, but UPSC doesn't ask you to be optimistic about the future of Pakistan. And also understand that in the long era or the long time period of civilizations, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, they hardly make a difference, right? It is a culture, it is a tradition which progresses forward, which remains in the collective memory. In case of Pakistan, yes, it has taken a significant amount of economic downturn, social, cultural, closed atmosphere that it has created, which will haunt it up. But then, as Dr. Manmohan Singh had rightly said, even as late Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee had also rightly said, a prosperous Pakistan is eventually going to be beneficial for India, right? Because of the trade that we can do, because the economic benefit that we can have, because of the money that we can save by the deploying the defense forces on full alert throughout the year, the lives that we can save. So for that, Pakistan in itself is going to have to go through a self-correcting measure. Otherwise, we will witness a Talibanization in that area. And then in that case, all that we will be doing is we'll be shutting our doors to the Western neighbor. Already we are doing that. For example, SARC, you would hardly be hearing about SARC anymore. Rather, you would be hearing about BIMSTEC and other of these associations. So we have already isolated Pakistan from our foreign policy outlook, and that will continue to, or that is something which will be pursued furthermore, depending upon what is the role played by the civil society in that area or the military establishment in that area. But within the next 10 to 20 years, already the difference between the economies of these two countries would have been so significant that we would already now, we don't have our defense preparedness based upon Pakistan. No, we have our defense preparedness based upon China. So just like China and India have got a very glaring gap now, we are going to develop much greater glaring gap with Pakistan also in the coming days. So over a period of time, Pakistan is going to become very irrelevant for us, if not completely shut out. Okay. Now, after this, we come to the portion of physiography. Also, China claiming that they used to have winter Silk Route through the new emergent range. China claims, so when you have the Arctic, and in the Arctic region, all the countries are basically trying to get a control over Arctic because Arctic has oil. So all these countries, they used various different techniques. What did China do? China came up one fine morning and said that, you know what, polar Silk Route passes through here. So our ancient polar Silk Route would pass through here. So, but Silk Route in itself, there is a very good book written by William Dalrymple. But again, I am afraid to go into the realms of history here. That is outside. so outside the parameters of this. But if you get an opportunity to study William Dalrymple, you should. So William Dalrymple very ably puts it that, or in fact, during the G20 summit, when India declared the India Middle East Europe corridor, at that point of time, William Dalrymple came upon various different media platforms and did say this, that the Silk Route, all of this is a manifestation only as old as around 500 years to 600 years. Before that, you did not have any of such in existence. But when you talk about India's historic trade routes, we have evidences of this going back millennia altogether. From the Roman scriptures, we have those records. Roman scriptures don't have the records of trade with China at all. Right. So all of that is a figment of imagination where you paint the past much glorious than what it used to be, something that we also do. We always say that the past was so glorious. It was never very, very glorious, but it was not very bad either. So that is something that China also indulges in. Right. So that is where their policy has been consistent through the years. But you should, if you get the opportunity, you should listen to the interviews that William Dalrymple has made. It is particularly enriching in terms of information. Now, physiography. What do we mean by physiography? So, physiography of an area is the outcome of the structure, process, and the stage of development. In simple terms, the topography of a region, whether you have mountains, plains, etc. So, in total, across the country, India's physiography can be divided into 6 different parts. To the north, you do have the mountains, that is the Himalayas, which extend in the north and even in the northeastern portion. Then you have the northern plains, the vast, expansive northern plains in existence. Then to the west of it, you have the dry desert of Thar, which is situated, which we share with Pakistan also. Then, to the south of the northern plains, we have one of the oldest land masses across the world in the form of the Peninsula Plateau. Then we have the Ghats across the Peninsula Plateau and also the coastal plains associated with them. And eventually, we also have the islands. So these are your various different physiographical divisions. Now, ideally, in your reference books, in your NCRTs, etc., what is done, what is followed is basically you have the naming of these, the extent of these is given, and that's it. So you can follow that for your general studies. But here, what we are going to devise as a methodology is we are going to look into the formation of each one of them. The Himalayas formation is something that we have already covered in very significant detail. So the formation of Himalayas is something that we are not going to repeat. But how is it that the Peninsular Plateaus got created? How is it that the Northern Plains got created? So with each one of them, we are going to take a look into the formation, because once you understand the process of formation, the type of rocks that you find in the area, the types of soil that you find in an area, the prospect of minerals to be found in that area. Why is it that minerals are only found in the states such as Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Karnataka, Telangana, and that's it? Why is it so? Why don't you have minerals such as coal, etc., to be found in the region of Uttar Pradesh? You don't have that. Or Punjab, you don't have that. So once you understand the origin of the physiographic divisions, all these they flow naturally. So that is the policy, or that is the approach we are going to follow. Having said that, at any point of time, if you feel that the formation process of it is very complicated, something that your mind should not be cluttered with, you are absolutely free to declutter yourself at that point of time and just look at the basics of it, the naming of it, the location of it, and you can carry on with that study as well. Okay. But for the rest who are comfortable with it, I would urge you that understand the formation. UPSC is never going to ask you a question, how is it that the peninsular India was formed? 15-mark question. No. UPSC did ask a question about the features of Deccan traps. Now, those candidates who did know about the formation of Deccan traps, they definitely had an advantage over the other candidates who, from the various different books, just studied where the Deccan trap is, in which particular state Deccan trap is, and what is Deccan trap. That's it. So that is why you can have an advantage, but it won't be a direct question based advantage. Okay. Having said that, let us initiate the discussion from the portion of Himalayas. Now, the Himalayas, these are your parallel ranges moving from northwestern part of the country to the northeastern part of the country almost continuously. Now, when we say the Himalayas, these represent the parallel ranges, the three parallel ranges which extend all the way from west to east. Now, it is because these are parallel, that is why they are considered a single entity in the form of Himalayas, and they are continuous. But you also have other mountain ranges which are to the north of the Himalayas, which are mountain ranges which are not parallel, which are not continuous. So these are the mountain ranges that are referred to as by the name Trans Himalayas. So when you consider the term Trans Himalayas, Trans Himalayas refers to the ranges which are situated beyond the Himalayas. So here you have the ranges such as the Karakoram range, Ladakh range, Ladakh range, Zaskar range, and Kailash range. These are considered to be Trans Himalayas. Okay. Now, if you observe these Himalayas, the Himalayan ranges themselves, they consist of three parallel mountain ranges. The highest one of them, which is present in the interior, this one is the highest one. This is what is referred to as the inner Himalayas or the greater Himalayas or Himadri. So the Himalayan range, when we talk about, so you have inner Himalayas, or great Himalayas, or Himadri. This is the tallest, the highest. Then you have the middle Himalayas or Himachal. Or Himachal. And eventually, you have the outer Himalayas or Shivalik. Okay, these are basically what are considered to be the mountain ranges or the Himalayan ranges. Now, as you can observe, the extent of it, the extent of the folding, the extent of these mountains, they are much more wider in the western portion as compared to the eastern portion. So here they are much more wider, right? Here they are significantly narrower. So there is a greater amount of compression which has happened in the eastern portion as compared to the western portion. Himachal, is it Uttarakhand? Himachal, is it Uttarakhand? As in Himachal. Okay, are you talking about the middle ranges? This one. So you have. Okay. So the middle ranges of Himalayas, they are also known as the Himachal Himalayas. They are not necessarily, it is not the case of Himachal Himalayas, Uttarakhand Himalayas. The middle ranges, they are also known by the name of, just like the innermost ranges are known by the name Himadri, the outermost ranges are known by the name Shivalik, the middle ranges are also named as Himachal. Okay, I hope that is understood. Now, as I was telling you, the width is much wider in the western part, and there's a greater compression which has happened in the eastern part. Now, across the region of Himalayas, that is why this is a region which frequently suffers from seismic activities, earthquakes, which are very, very common in this area because of incredible amount of compression that the rocks have faced and the deformities that the rocks have gotten. That is why in the northeastern portion, because the compression is high, the tendency of the deformation is high. That means the probability of earthquakes there is also very substantially higher. Now, if you take a look at the portion of the Himalayas, the axis of the Himalayas in general, here you will observe that the central axis of the Himalayas here goes somewhat like this. However, the mountains or the fold mountains beyond it, you will observe, whether be it Suleiman or Kirthar ranges, here there is a bend in the mountain range. Here also the mountain range, the direction changes, the central axis of the mountain changes. So, in the westernmost portion and the easternmost portion, you will observe that there is a sudden change in the axis in terms of the direction that the mountains they tend to face. So that means there is a axis which gets discontinuous. So this is what is referred to as syntaxial bend. Okay. Himalayas have got two syntaxial bends. Syntaxial bend. And here you will have two syntaxial bends in Himalayas. One is in the west, that is Nanga Parbat. Another one is in the east, that is here, where you have Namcha Barwa, from where you observe river Brahmaputra taking a sudden southward bend, Namcha Barwa. Okay. So, Himalayas overall, you will have two syntaxial bends. What is syntaxial bends? Here the keyword is axis, right? Axial bend. So basically, you would observe that the general alignment, the general direction that the Himalayan ranges they indicate, they will have a bend beyond the region of Namcha Barwa, the mountain ranges which are present here, Suleiman, Kirthar, etc. They have a different alignment altogether. Here also, when you consider Patkai Bam, then you consider the Mizo or Lushai Hills, all of these, Naga Hills, all of them, their angle is different. Their alignment and orientation is different as compared to the folds that you observe in Himalayas. So there's a change in axis, sudden change in axis in these areas. So that is your syntaxial bend indicated by the Himalayas. Okay. Now, when we talk about these Himalayas as a feature, they consist of the Himalayas and the northeastern hills, and they consist of a series of parallel mountain ranges. The general alignment is from northwest to southeast. That is your general alignment. And length of the Great Himalayan Range is 2,500 kilometer from east to west, and its width varies from 160 to 400 kilometer from north to south. Okay. Now, that width is quite significantly larger in the west, and width narrows down when you move to the east due to greater amount of compression. So, width narrows down in the east due to greater compression. Okay. Now, furthermore, this is the cross-sectional analysis of the region of the Himalayas. Now, while we have already seen about the formation of Himalayas. How is it that you had the various different phases of upliftment of Tethys as the Indian plate did collide with the Eurasian landmass, and that uplifted Tethys then folded with the various different land masses to create the various different mountains. Okay, so that is how you have the creation of the various different mountain ranges. In case you have any doubts in that, you can please revisit the recorded lectures. You will get a detailed analysis and an idea about the formation of Himalayas in very significant detail. Having said that, what I want you to notice here is something different. I want you to notice here the various different mountains of the Himalayas, the ranges of Himalayas. So, greater or inner Himalayas, that is this one, this is the tallest, the highest, Mount Everest, Kanchenjunga, all of them are situated on this. Then you have middle or lesser Himalayas. Then you have Shivalik or outer Himalayas, and then you have the Indus or Indo-Gangetic Plain region. In between them, you have the MCT, MBT, and HFF. What are these? So these are basically your thrust faults. So these are your main central thrust. This is your main boundary thrust. And this is your Himalayan frontal fault. Okay, these are your basically the various different thrust faults which are present. Can we say the point where syntactial bends having bend mountains layout, where the mountains, their direction changes? If the mountain is having a direction like this and then suddenly a direction like this is a syntactial bend in the folding. And does the height also increases significantly while moving from west to east due to variation in compression? Not always. Not always. No. But then the distance from the plains to the highest peak, that keeps on reducing. So that means immediately from the plains you will start observing great Himalayas in the region of northeastern portion and eastern portion, whereas in the west you don't observe that. Okay, Pavitra, you once convey the allow screenshots to the. I hope you are able to access the annotations of this PPT and PDF at a later point of time. I hope there is no issue in that, Pavitra. So if the annotations of the PPT are available, I don't think that screenshot is that important matter with you, because anyways when you have basically the annotations of the PPT available, that should solve the purpose. If Himalayas is that much unstable, then why no any volcanoes occur in Ladakh areas? Why will the volcanoes occur? What is the reason for the occurrence of volcano? Go back to the basics. In any part of the world, do you come across a region where continent-continent convergence has led to a volcanic eruption or will lead to a volcanic eruption? Absolutely not. Himalayas are created because of a kind of continental-continental convergence. That is why no volcanoes. Okay, so that is why, right? Oceanic plate is not there. Correct. Now, these are your thrust faults basically. Now, what do we mean by thrust faults? When you talk about thrust faults, what is the meaning of them? Thrust. Thrust means a push. We have discussed about the formation of thrust faults also while we were discussing about the formation of Himalayas. If you remember module 2 or module 3, I understand it might appear to be something which would have happened long time back. But if you recall, that is where we had a detailed discussion about the thrust faults. But nonetheless, these thrust faults, they are created when the rocks, they cannot get compressed or they cannot get deformed beyond their elastic limit. When they get deformed beyond their elastic limit, that is when they simply break away, right? So these thrust faults, when you take a look at it, these get created. So I will just tell you the mechanism of it. So when the initial folding happened and you had the creation or the formation of the Great Himalayas, right? When you had the formation of the Great Himalayas, as the convergence continued to happen, the height continued to increase, which continues to increase even today. But in this area, where the pressure was being applied across the landmass for that convergence to happen, for the compression to happen, over a period of time, obviously rocks cannot get deformed beyond a point. Rocks have got a kind of a limitation about what is the limit to which will get deformed. So that is when here the rock simply broke off and developed a kind of a crack. Now, once the crack developed, right, then further compressive movement across the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate meant that there would be a movement happening here also. The rocks would slightly get pushed. And meanwhile, this mountain would continue to get compressed because of the movement of the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. So, this movement happening across the crack, that is what is a thrust fault. That is how thrust faults get created. Now, why thrust? Thrust is a push, a kind of a pressure. So that is where, because of the pressure, a fold or rather a crack has been developed. Now, further as the process of compression continued, meant what was basically that you had simultaneous creation of here. You had this thrust fault. Now the land in this area also began getting compressed. So you basically had simultaneous creation of other mountain, that is the Himachal Himalayas, that is the middle Himalayas. And there again, as after a point of time the compression continued, here also a thrust fault developed. Further compression meant that there would be another set of mountains in the form of shivaliks which have come over. As the compressions have continued, there is a thrust fault which has developed beyond the shivaliks. That is the thrust fault which gets activated or which experiences a movement whenever you experience that an earthquake has occurred in the northern part of the country, most of them, Assam, for example, in certain areas of Haryana nowadays. So that is an extension of the Himalayan frontal fault. And it also is a sign, is a symbol that in the coming few years or in the coming few millions of years, we will expect a fourth range of Himalayas to come beyond the Shivaliks. In the present day region of northern plains of Uttar Pradesh, northern portion of Uttar Pradesh, northern portion of Bihar, northern portion of West Bengal, portions of Assam, in those areas, there's an expectation of another round of folding happening beyond the Shivaliks because we have these thrust faults. So whenever there is any amount of compression, any amount of movement happening either from the Indian plate or the Eurasian plate, there will be a movement triggered across these thrust faults. And whenever a movement is triggered, that in itself initiates or brings into existence very severe earthquakes. That is why these MCT, MBT, and HFF, they are sites of significantly severe earthquakes. For example, the Kathmandu earthquake 2015 did occur due to movement across MBT. For example, even recently, the Nepal earthquake, which occurred due to the movement across MBT. So, across these thrust faults, whenever any movement happens, that leads to seismic activities. Okay. So, likewise, in a few 100 million years, whole of Indian landmass will converge and add up. If it continues to happen in the same manner, which it never will, it is not the case that it will Indian landmass will continue to be pushed into the Eurasian landmass perpetually. There is a frequent reversal of the cycle also happening every few 100 million years. But having said that, if let's suppose the present continuous movement or the present trend of movement continues to happen, it would still take you more than a billion year to subsume the entire landmass such as India, if the present rate of movement goes on. So, but yes, the northern plains, if the rate goes on as of now, the northern plains would be completely subsumed. Okay. Now, After this, we take a look at the different ranges. So Himadri. Now here also another thing that you have to understand is that you have the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. It is the push from the Indian plate which is very significant, and the push from the Eurasian plate which is lesser so. So that is why even the foldings that you have, the folds that are created, they are much steeper on the southern slope and are more gentler on the northern slope. Okay. So that is the shape that you have, where steep southern slope, and gentle northern slope. This is a feature that you will find in Himadri also, in Himachal also, and in Shivaliks also. And this is because of the push that the Indian plate experiences. So, this kind of a unique topography is what is also referred to as the hogback topography. Okay, this is what is referred to as the hogback topography. I hope this is understood. Okay, so before we move ahead, uh, yes, we can take a break. So we'll take a break and we'll be back in 10-12 minutes, and then we will continue with the further familiarization with the remaining physiographic divisions. So let's take a break. Okay, and let's be back in 10 minutes. A confirmation about the audio, please. If the audio is clear, thank you. Sridevi, eggs topography is in desert. No, eggs basket of eggs topography or drumlins are created as a result of the glacial movement. Okay. So now we take a look at the various different features of Himalayas and the landforms which are created or are formed in the process. So when we talk about the Himadri, so it is the northernmost range, or what is also known as the Great or the Inner Himalayas. It is the highest one. It is the range where out of the three ranges of the Himalayas, the folding began at the earliest. Right. So it is the most continuous range, consisting of the loftiest peaks with an average of 6,000 meters of height. Right. So on an average, the peaks are 6 kilometers above the sea level. Now, the folds are asymmetrical. They're not symmetrical. They have a very steep southern slope and a gentle northern slope, the hogback topography that we have referred to. So, very steep southern slope and a gentle northern slope. Okay. So, that is why it is asymmetrical. Now, after this, here you will find in the region of Himadri, majority of the one of the tallest peaks, a few of the tallest peaks in the world, you'll find in the Himadri ranges. So, for example, Everest, Kanchenjunga, Makalu, Dholagiri, Nanga Parbat. So, all of them till Annapurna, they are 8,000 meters above. Nowhere else in the world will you find so many peaks above 8,000. In fact, in other places of the world, nowhere will you find a peak of 8,000 meters or more. Right. So that is why, even for example, in Karakoram, you have the K2 or the Godwin Austen. Now, that is also 8,000 plus. It is the second highest peak of the world. But it is not a part of the Himalayan region. It is a part of the Karakoram ranges. So these are the regions of the world where you have the highest peaks to be present. Now, here, obviously, by the way, many of you also have the tendency to learn the name of these peaks and their height. Please don't do that. Please never do that. Don't learn these names. If you get familiarized with them over a period of time when you are studying more about the particular region, etc., fair enough. But please don't start memorizing the names of it. Okay. Now, then we have the Himachal or the Middle Himalayas or the Lesser Himalaya as it is referred to. It is the middle range. Its folding had been initiated close to around 40 million years back. That is almost around 10 to 15 million to 20 million years later as compared to the Himadri. So obviously the height is not that great. The height is roughly around 40 on an average. On an average, the height is roughly around 4,500 meters above sea level. Now, they are known by different names in different parts, right? So, all across the Himachal ranges, they have different names across different parts. So, the range line to the south of Himadri is the most rugged mountain system that are mainly composed of highly compressed and altered rock systems. Now, in the region of Himadri and Himachal, you have evidences of marine rocks, mostly in the region of Himadri, that is in the Great Himalayas. You have many evidences of rocks such as limestone, which have gotten folded. Right, and limestone is present always. Limestone formation is always there where underneath the shallow waters. If you recall, while we were talking about rocks, we had discussed about it that limestone gets created in the case of the shallow waters. So those are the regions where rocks such as limestones get created. And when you have the presence of these in these great mountains or the great Himalayas, that is a further evidence of the fact that it has basically been the Tethyan sea floor which has risen up to form, and then further compression and the landmass which has risen up to create these substantially high mountain ranges. So here in the region of the middle Himalayas, also in the great Himalayas also, the amount of compression which these regions have experienced is so very high that many of the rocks in this, they have actually gotten converted into metamorphic rock systems. Now, altitude basically varies between 3700 to 4500 meters on an average, and the width is around 50 kilometers, right? So here, as we have the same type of features in Alps mountain, yes. Is there any choice to ask heights of peaks? Absolutely not. What is it that UPSC will ask? What is the height of Mount Everest? 8848, 8849, 8850 meters. Please understand the examination that you are appearing for. This is not your some state service examination or a lower grade examination thereby. Okay. And shape of altered rocks. By altered rocks, we basically mean that the rocks have been converted into metamorphic rock system. Earlier, if you had a rock like this, due to compression from all sides, this has got, earlier if it was the igneous rock, it has gotten converted into a metamorphic rock system now. That's it, where the particle arrangement, the property of the matter, everything keeps on changing. As for example, limestone gets changed into marble, right? Granite gets converted into gneiss. So like that, you have the change from the igneous or sedimentary rock into metamorphic rock system. That is what the altered rock here refers to. Okay. Rugged basically refers to a kind of an undulation which is present, where you have the present almost a continuous uh, presence along with the various different peaks, valleys, all of that included. That is what is represented here. Limestone deposits are also found in Telangana. We can say that at one point it was in Shal. Absolutely, yes. The region of present day Telangana, that lied in between the areas of the Karnataka plateau and the Bastar plateau. So as these plateaus were created first, you had water in between them. That is why even regions of Karnataka, you will find the presence of limestone. Madhya Pradesh, you will find the presence of limestone. Rajasthan, you will find the presence of limestone and marble. Northeastern portion, you will find the presence of limestone. Right? So these are the regions which have remained underwater historically. Now, here, as I told you, the region of Himachal, they have been associated or given with different names. So, Pir Panjal range, that forms the longest and the most important range, right? The Pir Panjal, which is present in which area? In the region of Jammu Kashmir Himalayas. Pir Panjal is one of the continuous ranges in the Jammu Kashmir Himalayas. The Jawahar tunnel that you have, all right, the Jawahar tunnel which connects Jammu to Srinagar. So that is across the Pir Panjal ranges. In fact, the Pir Panjal Pass at one point of time used to provide the easiest and the simplest connectivity between Jammu and Srinagar. But then now that portion is not being used because it is under Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So Pir Panjal range in the region of Himalayas, in the region of Jammu Kashmir, is a part of the middle Himalayas. Then when you come to the Himachal Pradesh, there you have the Dhauladhar, which continues in the region of Himachal Pradesh to the parts of Uttarakhand as well. Then Mahabharat Lake in the region of Nepal, that is the central Himalayan region, that is where you will have the Mahabharat Lake ranges. These are your prominent ranges of middle Himalayas. Here it consists of famous valley of Kashmir, the Kangra and the Kulu Valley in Himachal Pradesh. They are well known. Even the Char Dhams that you have, right? Or the very famous the holiday destinations, hill stations that you have, such as Dalhousie, then, for example, even Dharmshala, then McLeodganj, all of these, they are situated. Masuri is already known, so Masuri is also situated in all these across the region of the Middle Himalayas. Okay, that is where the Middle Himalayas are basically present. Some part of Masuri is present even in the region of Shivaliks. Then, here by the way, you have to understand one thing, that for a substantial period of close to around 20 million years, 15 to 20 million years, you had a folding only happening in the form of the great Himalayas. Then again, That is 40 million years back when the folding of the middle Himalayas was initiated. So that was something which happened up uniquely. And for almost around 12, up till 15 million years before present, there was no existence of Shivalik. So that means you had a considerable time period of tens of millions of years where you had two ranges of Himalayas in existence. Now, when you have the presence of these two ranges of Himalayas, now already you have the emergence of rivers from these two ranges. So you had the rivers emerging from the Great Himalayas as well and the Middle Himalayas as well. Now, these rivers, when they would flow into the present day area where you find Shivaliks, in those regions they would deposit sediments. So, large, vast, and fertile sedimentary plains were created in the process. Very large, vast, and fertile sedimentary plains were created. Okay. And then there was another phase of folding which happened, which created the Shivaliks. So, Shivaliks basically is composed of the sediments which were at one point of time brought by the rivers draining from the middle Himalayas and the great Himalayas. That is what created these sedimentary reaches. Okay. So, the outermost range of the Himalayas, that is the Shivalik, it extends over a width of 10 to 50 kilometers, has an altitude of around 2000 meters, 1500 meters on an average. It is composed of unconsolidated sediments. Unconsolidated means it is not structured, it is not layered, it is straight away dumped ahead, right? You don't have a layering of it, hence unconsolidated. So, unconsolidated sediments brought down by the rivers from the main Himalayan ranges located further north. So the rivers which would have originated from the Himadri and the Himachal, they would have deposited it. And then over a period of millions of years, there would have been folding which would have been experienced in this region. And hence you would have the creation of the Shivaliks. Okay. So that is how you had the formation of these ranges. Now, Shivaliks, just like the case of the Middle Himalayas, they are also known by different names in different parts of the country. For example, in Jammu, referred to as the Jammu Hills, then Dhang and Dundwa range in Uttarakhand. Significantly, the Dundwa range, that is where you have a significant population of the tiger also. Historically, if you go back 200 to 300 years back, this was a region of a significant population of rhinos also, by the way. But nonetheless, now the rhinos, they are almost not present from that area. Tigers are still present. So the Dhang and the Dundwa range, Churia Ghat hills of Nepal, then Dafla, Miri, Mishmi, and Abor in the region of Arunachal Pradesh. These are the various names that the Shivalik is given in various parts of the country. Okay. How the ranges are formed. For that, I would suggest to you, kindly take up the recordings of the second and the third module. There we have talked in significantly greater detail. I would advise you in general that get a detailed idea about plate tectonics and the plate tectonic movement that we have discussed in quite a significant amount of detail. So then you will automatically be able to understand why earthquakes occur, why is it that folds and faults occur. There can be compression not leading to a fold, there can be a compression leading to a break or a fracture, a rift valley structure, what is a rift valley structure. So all those basics, take a deeper look at the recordings, you will be able to understand. It won't be um, justice on you, on my part also, if I tell you very briefly about how the ranges are created. Neither will you get a clearer picture, nor will I be able to explain it completely well. So always advisable, take a look at the recordings now that the recordings are available. So that is how basically you have the three particular ranges. Now we will take a look into the landforms which are created by the Himalayas and in between these particular ranges. Do we need to remember these names of the ranges? Yes, you need to be aware of the names of the ranges. So, first of the landforms that we will discuss is basically going to be dunes and duars. These are depositional ranges. Okay. These are basically not depositional ranges, depositional features. So when we talk about dunes and duars, these are depositional landforms. And listen to the logic very carefully. Okay, once you understand that, you will be able to understand the formation of karevas also. So understand that. So basically, imagine a scenario where, if you talk about it, the middle Himalayas, that is the Himachal, that was already formed for millions of years. You had major rivers also draining from that area, and you had certain minor rivers also draining from that area. Minor means not that very powerful. Now, 15 years ago, there was a folding which started happening to the south of the middle Himalayas. But it was not the case as if this entire landmass in itself is rising up. You had folds happening, and when the folds happen, you have the peaks getting created, the individual systems getting created. In certain areas, what was observed? That where you had the presence of the middle Himalayas, let's suppose you consider this to be the region of the middle Himalayas. Now, you had rivers, the smaller rivers, which would originate from here. The smaller rivers which would originate from here. And they would continue to drain. However, in certain conditions, or in certain areas rather, not in certain conditions, in certain areas, there was a folding which started happening immediately at the mouth of it, at the head of it. And that folding meant folding for shivaliks. So that folding for shivaliks happened immediately at the mouth of it. Now, what it meant was basically that the flow of the water was blocked. And as the flow of the water was blocked, this water kept on getting accumulated here. It kept on getting accumulated. And not only did it keep on getting accumulated over a period of time, it filled the entire region between these two peaks. Between these two areas, the region was filled with water. Now, you have a creation of a large water body in this area, isn't it? Now, this water is actually coming down from where? From top of the mountain. It is coming down from the top of the mountain. So, it is continuously going to bring deposits along with it as well. So, that is where in these areas, you had significant amount of deposits created, brought by the water and deposited. These deposits further manage to increase the height of the water. Now understand, the water is stored in the region of the mountains. Mountains have a conical shape, right? So if the water level increases beyond a point, water will start exiting from the region of the conical shape, isn't it? So if the water completely exits from there, it will leave behind what? Those deposits will be left behind. So that is how, as the amount of water kept on getting accumulated, the amount of accumulated water kept on increasing. Eventually, the water found its way out around the sides of shivaliks and it drained away, leaving behind those deposits. Now, these are deposits which exist between the mountains of middle Himalayas and mountains of outer Himalayas, that is shivaliks. And these deposits which get left behind, so eventually what you have in this condition is basically what you will observe, that if you have these deposits, the water gets drained away, and the deposits, they get left behind. And as these deposits, they get left behind, these are the regions that we regard as dunes or duars. Both dunes and duars, they represent the same depositional feature. If this feature is found to be created in the region of the Western Himalayas, they are named as dunes. If these same depositional features are found to be created in eastern Himalayas, that is in the region of northern West Bengal, Assam, etc., then it is known as duars. Okay, so I will repeat, the same depositional feature when created in the Western Himalayas are known by the name as dunes. The same depositional features when created in the region of the Eastern Himalayas, they are known as duars. But what are these depositional features? So basically, when you had the formation of the middle Himalayas, many of the smaller streams would also get generated from the mountains, as is the case. Now, after a few million years, when you had in certain places, the flow of the streams was blocked by the uprising of the Shivaliks. So, in those few areas where the flow of these streams were blocked, water started accumulating in between these folds. And as water accumulated substantially or significantly enough, basically, during the process of accumulation, water would also bring about the deposits that it would carry or it would manage to erode while coming down from the mountain top. So it would continuously manage to bring about significant amount of deposits. Eventually, as the water level in that particular storage area, the water level kept on increasing. Water exited from the sites, leaving behind those deposits. Deposits made out of sediments and various materials brought by the streams, which are generally fertile. So these deposits which get created between these mountains of middle Himalayas and the Shivaliks, they are known as dunes in the western Himalayas and they are known as duars in the region of eastern Himalayas. So here, basically, this is known as dunes in the western Himalayas and duars in the region of eastern Himalayas. Okay. So, for example, Dehradun, Kotli Dun, Patli Dun, these are your dunes. Those of you who belong from Dehradun, or when you would have visited, those of you who would have visited Dehradun, you would have observed this that when you stand at any of the tall buildings, you won't find many tall buildings in Dehradun. But if on any of the tall, for example, the clock tower is one of the tallest ones, if you manage to stand on top of the terrace of any of the buildings, you will observe that the entire region of Dehradun appears to be flattish, right? It is not like your regions of Shimla and so on, which is very apparently present on the slope of the mountain. No, when you observe Dehradun, it appears to be flattish and plain like area. But then all around the vicinity, if you notice, you will only observe mountain ranges of varying height that will be visible. So Dehradun in itself appears to be a plain area in between the mountains. And how is that created? That is also at an elevation. So that deposit would have happened when the streams would have managed to deposit the sediments in that large area. So that is how you have the creation of dunes and duars. Dunes get created, or they are the same landform, but when these landform gets created in the region of the eastern Himalayas, we refer to them as dunes, or in the western Himalayas, we refer to them as dunes. In the eastern Himalayas, we refer to them as duars. Okay. Shahid, Garo, Khasi, Jayanti are not Shivalik. No, they are considered to be part of the peninsular system of rocks. How Dehradun, does it established in those deposits? Yes, it has been established in those deposits. But the newly formed mountain having some height. So how water exited from that? Does some water absorb also by land? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What is the shape of the mountain? If let's suppose I had two of these mountains with a rectangle shape, water would have accumulated endlessly up till here, isn't it? But that is not the shape that the mountains have. What is the shape that the mountains have? They are conical in shape. If I take a front view, mountains are conical in shape. So water will keep on accumulating on one side of it, keep on accumulating, but eventually from the sides, won't the water find a way to drain out? So that is how the water drained out, leaving behind those deposits. And those deposits are known as dunes and duars. Is that understood? Newly formed mountain having some height is absolutely understood. I am assuming that the newly formed mountain has got significant amount of height. But here, when we talk about these newly formed mountains, understand that they are conical in shape. Now, if they are conical in shape means what? Here, if the water level keeps on increasing, it keeps on increasing at this particular portion, will the mountain be able to block that much amount of water as compared to the base? Base of the mountain is always broader. So in the base, you will always have lot of water which can get accumulated. But as the water level increases, the conical shape starts taking place. Won't the water start exiting from the sides? Is that understood, Priya? Good. Why do the same depositional phenomena have two different names? Based upon the regional aspect of it, in which region is that formed. Okay, so that is basically about the dunes and duars that we have. Now, a similar feature, or not a similar feature, basically you also have another feature that is very similar to dunes and duars, that is created in the region of Kashmir, what is referred to as karevas, which we'll take a look into. But before that, we talk about kos or chos, whatever you pronounce. Ganesh, is similar thing happened between Himadri and Himachal? No, you don't have such kind of deposits in between Himadri and Himachal. That is not to be found because the spacing between them is very less in many of the places, and about the because of the discontinuity also. So it is very uniquely to be present between the middle Himalayas and the Shivaliks. Okay. Now, then we come to the portion of kos or chos. Now, what are these and how do they get created? So when we consider the hogback topography means what? Hogback topography means the southern slope is going to be very steep. The northern slope is going to be very, very gentle, but the southern slope is going to be very, very steep. So that is the case with the Himadri also, that is the case with the Himachal also, and that is the case with Shivaliks also. In all the three ranges, because of the compression from the Indian plate, you have a hogback topography where the southern slope is so significantly steeper and the northern slope is very, very gentle, right? Now, this is the side view. Let's take the front view. Let's suppose this is the front view. Now, during monsoonal rainfall or the monsoonal season, this region will experience a substantial amount of orographic uplift, isn't it? They will experience a substantial amount of orographic uplift, and that orographic uplift will lead to the formation of very dense clouds, and the southern slope will experience very heavy rainfall. As a consequence, as a result of it, the southern slope will receive heavy, very, very heavy bouts of rainfall. Now, when you have the seasonal rainfall, now due to which across the steep slope, what will happen? Imagine a steep slope, and then you have a lot of rainfall on the southern side or one of the slope. The water will start rushing down in whichever pathway that it can find, isn't it? So here, water will start rushing down in whichever portions or the pathways that they can, depending upon the slope pattern. Now, as a consequence of this, water, these seasonal streams which get created, they will erode the slope completely. You can also imagine about it that when you have such a kind of a stream which is flowing, these are your seasonal streams. That is generated only because of substantial amount of rainfall. So these seasonal streams basically that will come into existence only during the rainy season. And these seasonal streams will carry out the erosion of that area quite significantly. So much so that the southern slope oftentimes is left barren as a consequence of that erosion. And that is when you will observe this is what is Kos or Chos. So, the southern slope of this range are almost completely devoid of forest cover in the region of Punjab and Himachal Pradesh and are highly dissected by the several seasonal streams which are locally known as Kos. So, this local stream or this particular seasonal stream gets into action during the rainy season. When, due to the hogback topography, it is the southern slope which receives very heavy amount of rainfall. And that is why there you will observe that erosion, the denudation of the land, weakening of the slope also by the seasonal local stream that is referred to as Chos or Kos. Okay. So in the case of dunes, nearby area of Dehradun having Masuri, will that be considered as a dune? No, Masuri is not. Masuri again, if you visit Masuri, you will observe the settlement across a slope, which is generally the case. Observe Dehradun, right? Observe Dehradun, be it by satellite image or the Google map, wherever you want. Observe it. It will appear to be on a flattish area in between the mountains. That is a dune, a unique part of it. Okay, right? Now, after this, we come to the formation of another kind of landform. That is what is referred to as karevas. So when we talk about karevas, Alhaj, my dear friend, you have joined the session pretty late. So by that point of time, we had already covered these dunes and duars. So kindly take up a look at the recording. Okay. So in case of late joining, I would always suggest you, I would always advise you that take a look at the recording to get a clearer picture. Okay. I hope that is understood, Alhaj. Now, now we move on to the portion of karevas. So, what are these karevas? Karevas are also depositional features. These depositional features are created in a very similar manner how the dunes and duars they get created. So the difference is that these karevas they have been created in the region of Jammu Kashmir and in between the Pir Panjal range to the south and the Zaskar and the Great Himalayas in the north. Right. Whereas in the case of the dunes and duars, we had the formation of those deposits in between the middle and the outer Himalayas, that is Himachal and Shivalik. Here you will have that formation between Himachal, that is the Pir Panjal range, and the Trans Himalayas of Zaskar and some portions of Great Himalayas. So these are your depositional features. Okay. Now formed between Zaskar and Great Himalayas to the north and Pir Panjal range to the south. So, what happened was you already had a folding which was created in between or in the region of the Trans Himalayas, the Great Himalayas. You had a folding which had happened, right? And as you had millions of years spanning between the folding of the Great Himalaya and Trans Himalaya, and then the folding of the Himachal Himalayas, that got initiated around 35 to 40 million years back. So you had a considerable time span. So in between that time period, you basically had the the Trans Himalaya or the Great Himalayas on one side, and you had the folding which was creating the Pir Panjal range. Now, in between this range, you again had a situation where substantial amount of water would get accumulated. Obviously, numerous rivers and streams would provide that water, and the amount of water accumulated was quite significantly high, right? Large amount of water was accumulated here, very large amount. Now, in the case of dunes and duars, we had seen that this accumulation of water was happening in small isolated places, very small places in terms of its area. But here, the accumulation was happening at a very, very wide level, at a very large area, right? It is expected to have happened in regions of spanning across 5,000 square kilometers or more. So, in that large area, almost in the entirety of the region of Jammu Kashmir, you had this particular kind of accumulation which was happening. Now, this formed a very large lake of sorts with water which was accumulated and continuously. That water was supplied by the streams originating from the Zaskar ranges, from Himadri, and they would supply the very fertile sediments. So, just like in the case of lake, also, whenever you have a lake, wherever you have a lake, there also you have certain amount of deposits. So here also deposits started getting created. And eventually, in the region from around Baramulla Gorge, I'm sure you would have heard about the name Baramulla. Baramulla is a very historic trading town present in the region of Jammu Kashmir, significantly used for during the Silk Route trade as well. And Mughals also, they would beautify the region of Baramulla very significantly. Historically also, Baramulla for thousands of years has been one of the key areas for travel, tourism, etc. It has been an important area. So from the region of Baramulla, in the region of Baramulla, you have a gorge, deep gorge, which got created. So from the Baramulla gorge, eventually the water exited. And when the water exited, it left behind very, very fertile deposits. Very fertile deposits were left behind of very fine particles of sand, sediments, etc. So you had these fertile deposits getting left behind, which were referred to as lacustrine deposits. Lacustrine, the name lacustrine deposit basically is used for a deposit created due to the formation of a lake. So, lacustrine deposits created due to a lake. So, a very large lacustrine deposit got created with Pir Panjal on one side and Zaskar and Himadri on the other side, and this deposit is referred to as Karevas. They have some of the most fertile soil and sediment conditions that you will find. That is why this is a region which is very, very rich agriculturally. Those of you belonging from Jammu Kashmir would already and obviously know that. Those of you who have visited Jammu Kashmir would also attest to the fact that agriculture is very productive in that area. Agricultural economy is quite significant in that area because the land is very, very fertile. Okay. And that land is fertile. Why? Because of the process by which it has been created. All the deposits being brought about by the streams, the rivers, etc., all of them getting deposited. That is why it became very fertile, having various different types of small micro mineral nutrients which are required for the growth of the plants. So here, nowadays, you'll find the growth of cultivation of fruits, fruits, and presence of many orchards you will find. Okay. But one of the biggest or one of the most prized output of this land is one of the costliest spice that you will come across, that is saffron. So this is one of the saffron producing regions of the country. So cultivation of fruit orchards and saffron. Okay. Largest producer of saffron in the world is? Are we aware of that? Which is the largest producer of saffron in the world? Very good, Pooja. If it would have been Jammu Kashmir and India, I would never have asked this question. Kerala does not produce saffron. No. Saffron generally grows in dry conditions, in lower temperatures, comparatively drier conditions. But it should not be so dry that it is a desert. Sri Devi, correct. It is Iran. Iran is one of the largest producers of saffron in the world. Okay. Now, these are your deposits which are created between the mountains. Parshuram, so now I think you can understand, but please understand, Parshuram, that it is not only these particular crops which can grow. The soil in the region is so very fertile that it can support wide variety of crops. Okay, if need be, you can grow wide variety of crops in that area. That is how fertile this Kareva is. Okay. In India, saffron is cultivated in the region of Jammu Kashmir. It is one of the largest producer in India. In fact, whatever saffron is produced, 99% of it comes from the region of Jammu Kashmir itself, from these karevas. Okay. Yes, similar like alluvial. Pratik, correct. Now, when we talk about the region of middle Himalayas, and in certain regions, even the greater Himalayas, but mostly in middle Himalayas, during the summer season, at an altitude of around 3,000, 4,000 meter, and even slightly above that, you will find the presence of lush green grasses. Now, I hope we are aware that in the mountainous areas beyond a particular height, you will not find the presence of trees. Okay, because the temperature goes very low, the wind is so strong that the trees will never be able to survive. So, in the mountains beyond a particular height, trees will be absent. What is referred to as tree line in the mountain. Okay, so as the temperatures they start becoming lower, the trees their presence becomes much more difficult. Okay, now beyond a height of 3,000, 4,000 meter, you will find the growth of very lush green grasses, particularly during the summer season. During the winter season, this entire region will be covered under thick blanket of snow and ice. During the winter season, if you look at this area, you will never even have the inkling of an imagination that at some point of time grasses would also exist here. But during the summer, you have these grasses. So these seasonal grasslands, which develop higher up in the mountains during the summer season, they are referred to as by the name bugyals, particularly in the region of Uttarakhand, that is the Garhwal Kumaon Himalayas. In that area, they are referred to as by the name Bugyals. That is where it is most prominently found. Now, during the winter season, this entire region will be covered under very thick blanket of ice and snow. It is only during summer that you will find these grasses in existence. Now, this is utilized by the nomads and the shepherds. You have large section of nomadic community in this region. Nomadic community basically who can the banjaras, right, who travel from one region to another in terms of the occupation, in terms of pasture land for their animals that they have, and so on. So you have a large section of the nomadic community which basically keeps on moving. So, and they have lot of sheep, goats, etc. Now, during the summer season, they climb across these ranges along with all their animals to find a good pasture land for their animals so that the animals can graze upon them. They can get the food. As soon as the winter comes in, as soon as the winter sets in, Along with the animals, they come down the slope into the plain areas to escape the harshness of the winter. And obviously, the grasses would also not be present during the winter. Again, come the summertime. Again, they will move up the slope in order to feed their cattle. This continuous seasonal migration in order to search for pasture land for their animals, this is what is also referred to as transhumance. This is what is also referred to as transhumance, which basically means seasonal migration. Seasonal migration up and down the slope in order to find pastures for grazing, or simply grazing land for animals. So you have various different tribes in the area who indulge in that. So, for example, in Uttarakhand, in parts of Himachal, you have the Bhotias who do that. Then you have in the region of Jammu Kashmir, you have the Bakarwals, right? Then you also have the Gujars, they also indulge in that, right? So all these, basically carry out transhumance, where they will move down the slope during the winter season and then again climb up during the summer season in order to feed on these seasonal grasslands. These seasonal grasslands, they are known as bugyals, right? So these are your seasonal grasses, grasslands at higher altitude. Okay, that is what we understand by bugyals. Now, after this, when we move to the eastern portion, now in the eastern portion, this is Namcha Barwa. This is the region where the Himalayas take a across this entire area. If you can imagine, you have mountain systems across this entire area, and that is where the mountains, they take a sudden southward bend. So that is the region of the syntaxial bend. Okay, so it is, in fact, if you will notice, it is around this Namcha Barwa where, because the entire mountain systems take a bend, that is why even the mighty river Brahmaputra, even mighty river Brahmaputra is forced to have a southern bend from the region of Namcha Barwa, where it carves out a very, very deep gorge in the region as it takes the bend from the area of Namcha Barwa. But nonetheless, you have the folds which are present in the eastern frontier as well. So you have Patkai Bam, Naga Hills, and Mizo Hills. These are very much the fold mountains which get created or which have been created as you had the Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian landmass. So that is a part of these mountains. These are not very high. These are covered in dense vegetation and forest. This comes under the part of the in terms of the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot. That is what it is a part of. Garo Khasi Jayantia is not part of the northeastern hills. Garo Khasi Jayantia region, that is considered to be a part of the Meghalaya plateau, which is considered to be a remnant of the Peninsular Plateau, the larger Peninsular Plateau. It is considered to be a remnant of that. Okay. Now here on the Indian side, you have the Patkai Bam, Naga Hill, Mizo or Rushai Hills. On the side of Myanmar also, you have the fold mountains which had been created during the convergence, and there you will find the presence of Arakan Yoma, Pegu Yoma mountain ranges. That is something which you will find across the border. Okay. How to remember these tribes? There are many tribes. So see, one of the ways that the candidates they follow is they write it down on a piece of paper and they simply try to rote learn it. That is something that I would absolutely ill advise you or advise you not to do that. What I would advise you, wherever you come across the particular tribe, let's suppose you come across the fact that Todas, they live in certain part of southern India, or Irulas, they are good snake catchers, etc. Now, Chakmas, for example. Now, in whenever you come across them, immediately think about the region where they are. After that, if you can finalize or furnish a list, fair enough. That will be for your revision. Okay. So, whichever sources of information from current affairs, etc., that you gather, that, as I told you, this is a game of accretion of knowledge, accumulate knowledge from all sides. So, get those tribes, the list of them if you want, the context, why you want those tribes or why you are learning those tribes, that should be clear. Because many of the times, by just by their primary sense of occupation, etc., you get an idea of the region as well. So that should be clear, that under what context did you manage to learn that tribe, and after that it will be easy going. Okay. Mizo, Naga, Patkai, these are the part of the eastern Himalayas. Yes, the portion of the northeastern mountain ranges that you have. Okay. Now we come to the portion of northern plains. So, immediately to the south of the lofty mountain peaks of Himalayas, you have one of the most fertile land masses across the world in the form of the northern plains. Now, these northern plains, basically, they are having very fertile sedimentary deposits. For a long period of time, it was understood, okay, Abhishek chose is basically the seasonal streams which get generated across the southern slope of the Shivalik during the rainy season when there is heavy amount of rainfall across the southern slope. Many seasonal streams they get generated, they will erode that area, and those seasonal streams in the local language they are referred to as chos. Okay. Now, coming to the northern plains. So, for a long period of time, the geographers they were pretty sure that look, mount from the lofty mountains of the north, you would have rivers which would originate. They would deposit those sediments, and that is how the northern plains got created. But here, the counter argument always used to be that fair enough. You are saying that the deposits have been carried by these rivers. So that means these deposits should have a significant amount of height. In many of the areas, the northern plains, you will find that the thickness of the sedimentary deposit is close to around 2 kilometers. In certain areas, it has been found that the thickness of the sedimentary deposit is even 3 kilometers. Right? So that much deposit effort has been carried out. And now that level, or now the height of the northern plains is close to the sea level. It should have been 2000 meters above sea level if you have 2000 meters worth of deposits. The height of the northern plain should have been 2000 meters above sea level. Why is it that now it has reached the sea level? That means there could have been a depression in that area where we see the northern plain. So, for a long period of time, you had very different contradicting theories provided by the different geographers. Eventually, you had a theory which was provided by Edward Seuss. And he provided the theory of 4D, concept of 4D. Okay, what do we mean by 4 deep? So, deep here refers to depression. 4 means something which lies in front. So, a depression in front. So, what Edward Hughes said that look, the land was getting folded, all right. The land was getting folded for the creation and the formation of Himalayas. But in that process of getting folded, nowhere will you have a land which gets folded only like this. In order to regain the equilibrium and balance, you had a situation where the land got downfolded in front of the Himalayas. Right? So the concept of 4 deep was the fact that as the Indian plate was coming and crashing, So you had very hard rocks in the form of the Peninsular Plateau. Now they could not be folded easily, right? Beyond the Peninsular Plateau, you had slightly flattish area. So as the upfold happened, which led to the formation of the Himalayas, simultaneously, you had a considerable downfold which happened as well. This was a portion of Peninsula Plateau. Okay. This was the portion of the Himalayas. In between them, you had the depression or a four deep got created. Or syncline. Now the rivers from the Himalayas, they started emptying themselves into this depression. And that is how the Indo-Brahm rivers, as they are known as, that is the Indus, Ganga, Brahmaputra river system together, combinedly, they are known as the Indo-Brahm rivers. So those Indo-Brahm rivers, they started filling it up. And they filled it up with significant amount of sediments. These were filled up with the sediments brought by the rivers. So, sediments brought by Himalayan rivers. Okay. Now that has led to the creation and the formation of northern plains. This is the reason why in many of the areas the northern plains are the sedimentary deposit in the northern plains have found to be having a depth of 2 to 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers in general. And this is the reason why this has been such a fertile landmass when it comes to agricultural crop productivity. Okay. So, with that, we basically take a break. And after the break, when we come back, we will talk more about the classification of the northern plains also. And what do we mean by Bhabar, Bhangar, Khadar, Tarai? That is something we will study. And then we will move ahead into the other portions of physiography. So, we take a break now. And we take a break till 2:16, 2:17. Okay. Break till 2:17 p.m. Okay. Take a break. Let's be back.